everybody, this is Andrew here with Tower Electric Bikes, and today we have a video covering two different services together, but they sort of go hand in hand, and that is we're going to be covering installing a new rear derailleur as well as installing a new shift cable. They sort of go hand in hand because, whenever you install a new derailleur or new shifter for that matter, you always want to start with a fresh cable. So instead of, doing a separate video on how to install a cable, we will just include that in this video here. Now you will need to replace this cable from time to time, whether, the cable breaks or gets all frayed and nasty here at the end or gets rusted, or what's more likely to happen is the cable just, gets stretched over time. The cables do wear as you use them. Obviously you're pulling it, that puts some amount of stress on it. And one of the things that happens as the cable stretches is obviously this derailleur works on tension with the shifter, and as the cable stretches, that tension goes away. And you can barrel adjust it and retension, but at a certain point the cable just, cable loses its life and you just need to swap it. And so we'll walk through how to do that in this video, along with installing a new rear derailleur. Typically you don't need to install a rear derailleur that often. You only need to do it really if this gets damaged somehow, like if you crash or if you drop it and it breaks this part. After enough time, the derailleur will wear out. The springs won't actuate as well. It just kind of gets worn. But that's something that happens very infrequently. Like you'll end up swapping many cables before you end up swapping the derailleur, just from wear. So some tools you will need for this job. You will need some Allen keys. You will need a 4mm Allen key as well as a 5mm Allen key. You will also need some cable cutters, and I highly recommend using actual bicycle cable cutters. Like I have these from Park Tool. Pedro makes some similar ones, but be sure to get bicycle related ones, or if you have really high-end cable snips for other handy jobs, those will probably work. But the big thing is you just don't want to use regular cable snips, or like the bladed internal of like some pliers, because while those can cut this cable, what they're going to do is they're going to pinch the cable. When they cut it, it's just two flat sides coming against each other, and once the cable gets cut, more than likely the end will sort of split apart and fray, and then your brand new cable, is fraying and coming apart already. Where some, cable cutters like these, they cut more radially in a circle. So when it cuts, the cable on the end is still, ideally, not frayed and is still nice and tight. And the last tool we will need will be a chain tool, because tied in with this is you will have to remove and put this chain back on. So if you have questions about, taking a chain off and putting it on, that will also partially be covered in this video. And then some supplies you will need for this job. Obviously you'll need a new rear derailleur, which I have right here. And then you will also need a fresh shifter derailleur cable. Now, one of the special notes about the shifter cable that you will need to know is you can't just use a regular old shifter cable. It will not be long enough. What's very common on beach cruiser style bikes, not necessarily just ours, but most beach cruisers that have multiple speeds in the back here, you most of the time have to use a tandem shift cable. These are made for obviously tandem bikes that will hold multiple people, which are very long. So we definitely won't use the full length, but typically a regular shift cable is not long enough to reach from the shifter down to the derailleur with the elongated frame. So having a tandem cable, allows us to have a little extra room. These aren't much more expensive than your average shifter cable. An average shifter cable will run you about $5 to $7. This will run you about maybe 8 to 10. So not a huge amount more, but it is something to be aware of. So without further ado, we will get to it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this old cable. Really, the first part of this video will be cable install. So if you're just here for cable install, we will tackle that section first. So we're going to grab our 4mm Allen key. What we're going to do is we're going to head over to the pinch bolt here that holds the cable to the derailleur, and we're just going to loosen that. We'll loosen it just enough, and you see the cable popped out on its own. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to snip off this old end. And I usually, I don't know if you can see this level of detail in the video, but you can see right where it was clamped to the derailleur, it's also kind of broken apart and frayed a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut right past that where we have nice clean cable. See, and you see this is why we use these radial cable cutters. You see we have a nice clean end that's not frayed out. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to pull this cable back through the housing, and if you cut it at a spot where it's all frayed out, what it's going to do is it's going to score up that housing as you pull it back through. That's going to damage the inside, and your cable's not going to slide as smooth through that housing. So now that we have that cable snipped and unmounted from the derailleur, we are going to head up to the shifter here. Now if you look right down here, you can see this little silver dot here. What that is the end of the shifter cable. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push that little cable end I have here. I'm going to push it, and as you can see, as I push it, you can see this little cable end pop out of the end of the shifter. Just grab that end and then just pull it all the way through. And there's a lot of cable to pull, so just keep tugging, just keep on tugging. Just keep tugging, and there you are. Your shift cable has been removed. As you can see, this is pretty long. This is a little bit longer than what your average shifter cable would be. So now that we have that removed, what we're going to do is we're going to open up our new shifter cable here. All right, and what you're going to do is you are going to find, there's going to be two ends here. You have a clean cut cable end, and then you have the cable end that has a little knock on there. What we're going to do is we're going to take the clean cable end, and we're going to feed it right back through that hole that we pulled the old cable out of. Now, I usually like to pop the housing that was stuck in there out, just to make sure I can get this out. And it may, you may have to kind of play around with this a little bit to get it to feed through. See, I got it here. But it's not like a straight enclosed channel that this cable goes through. It sort of just moves through the internals of this shifter. So you may have to push a few times till it finally finds that exit path. So once you have that exit path, just put it into the end of the housing here, right through the ferrule, and just feed it through. And at this point, that's when I like to tuck it back into the shifter. So now that it's back into the shifter, just push all that cable all the way through. And it's one solid piece of housing running from the shifter to your derailleur, so it's guided all the way through, so you just keep feeding and it will be going along the right path. All right, I hit a little resistance, and what that resistance means is it has probably popped out here on the other end, and it's just trying to come out of the opposite end of the housing. So I usually like to pull it out from the derailleur, and similar to the shifter, you kind of just got to keep pushing till there we go, it pops out. And then what I like to do is, instead of pushing cable, it's always easier to just pull it all the way through. And then you'll see on this end, as I pull it through, you'll see that little shifter end goes right in there, slots in, and the cable has been fed through. So now we have this excess cable here. What we're going to do is we're just going to, if you were just installing a new cable, you would just feed this through here, get the little housing tucked in, tuck it through there, and tighten this down. Once that's tightened down, then you'll go through the shifting adjustment process and get it all dialed in. We do have a separate video on that if you're curious on how to do that, because it does go into a little bit more detail, and this video could quickly turn into a very, very long one if I go into all the fine details. But if you're interested in that shifting adjustment, go ahead and check out that video. And that would really conclude the cable install. But we're going to go a little bit further, and we are going to install a new derailleur here. So I'm going to take that cable out of there. So now that we have our new cable fed through, the next step is we got to get this derailleur off of the bike. And the next step to that is we have to take the chain off. As you can see, this chain is a single unit and it loops through the derailleur, so we could theoretically unmount it here, but it's still going to be attached to the chain, so we got to break this chain at some point. So what you do is, if you look on your chain brake, you'll see a little U shape here. You're just going to take that little U shape onto into two of the link spaces, and then just gradually drive the pin on the tool into the pin on the chain. And then once you have it lined up properly, just twist that on out. And you can see the chain pin pushing out. Now you want to be real careful with this because we do not want to push this chain pin all the way out. We're going to rebuild this chain after. So if you push that pin all the way out, well, it is technically possible to get it back assembled. It's a pain in the butt. So we just want to push it out. Looks like a pretty good distance there to be pulled out. Then just dial that back out. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take the chain and pop it like that. And then you can see on this end here, you can see that there's a little bit of a chain end still sticking out there. So actually that's kind of a lot of chain end, so we'll see how it goes once we reinstall this, but I may end up pushing that pin just a little bit further out. So now that that chain is broken, what we just do is we're going to take it off and set it to the side. All right, so now the derailleur is only mounted on to the derailleur. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your 5mm Allen key, and right in this big spot here, right on the opposite side of the derailleur, of the hanger, you're just going to slot your 5mm in, and then just unscrew. All right, and from there you can dispose of your old derailleur, and we're going to install the fresh one. So the key thing you need to do when you install your new derailleur is, if you look here, at the spot we just unthreaded, you'll see that there's this long bolt here. This is called your B-limit screw, and we want to make sure the B-limit screw is placed properly. So if you look on your derailleur hanger, this little silver piece that hangs off the back, you can see it has this little flared knock at the bottom. This B-limit screw is going to mount right up against that knock. So what I like to do, just to be safe, is I like to turn the derailleur kind of all the way up like this, and then tighten it down, again using your 5mm. And when you turn it all the way up like this, it makes sure that it's going to attach right there. So, and you can see the B-limit screw prevents the derailleur from rotating on out that way. All right, so the new derailleur is now mounted to the frame. So now what we need to do is reinstall that chain that we just pulled off. All right, and I want to orient the chain so that pin is facing me. So I gotta flip this guy around. There we go. And then I drop it and reorient it. So, all right. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna pull this jockey wheel down, and then you're gonna take the chain. And remember, one of the easiest ways to, it's really easy to forget which way this routes around the jockey wheels. So easy way to remember it is along this bottom one, the chain is always going to run just like this. So until you can, it's helpful to take a picture before you take it off, take a little mental picture. And then this chain will then route up, and you'll see there's a little, I don't know if you can see from this angle, there's a little tab here on the pulley arm. It's gonna go in between, it's gonna go above that, and then underneath the upper jockey wheel. Give myself some extra chain here. All right, and then once you have it over that tab, you just rotate it back along the wheel, and then finally up and over the cassette. And then from there, just pull, 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 and get yourself enough to loop over the front chainring. And then bring it closer. All right, we are almost there. So it's one of the things you'll find is the derailleur pulley arm has quite a bit of tension on it. And so now what we're going to do is we're just going to rejoin those two ends that we separated. Yeah, so like I said at the beginning of the video, the pin's actually not out quite as far as we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this pin a little bit further out just so they can reconnect a little bit easier. And from this end, it's really easy to tell about how much pin space you have, because obviously you can see the pin itself. And right about there is probably good. All right, and I'm actually just going to unloop it off of that front chain ring. And let me make sure my chain's oriented properly. So I do have it oriented properly now, and then just get that little nub of pin just hooked into the hole, and there we go. So you can see it's got a little bit of hold on there because that little bit of pin is grabbing in. And we're going to take our chain tool, we're going to push this pin back into place. And then once it's lined up, just start twisting, pushing the pin in place, and then watch when it comes out of the other side, because we want to make sure it's not. I'm gonna get this realigned a little bit. It's pressing against the tool. There we go. All right, we don't want it pushing out too far, so you want to make sure they're even on either side, which they currently are. All right, and then one other thing you want to do once you put that chain back together is you'll see this chain link is pretty stiff right now. So what you're going to do is you're going to get it right in the center of your hands, and then you're just going to push and pull back and forth like this. Just wiggle it. What it does is it just loosens up that pin, and you can see it now has full range of motion. And then I'm just going to loop this back over the front chain ring, so we have a full complete chain on our drivetrain. Boom, would you look at that, reinstalled chain. So the final step is just to install this cable. So what we did, like you may have seen earlier in the video, is just slide that through the barrel adjuster, tuck the housing into its little cubby, and then you're going to take your, this one's a 5mm. All right, and then you're going to just slide it. If you can see here, it might be a little tough from the angle, you can see it has this big flat plate, and you can see a little cutout right about there. Well, that's the channel where our cable is going to rest. So give it a nice pull, give some nice tension there, and then tighten it down. If you have a cable tensioner tool, like Pedro, Park Tool make one, if you have that, this would be a good time to use it. It's not required, but it definitely makes life a little bit easier. I'm just going to do it with my hand right now. All right, there we go. Got some good cable tension there. And then finally, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to snip this cable, but you're not going to want to snip it here because you want to give yourself a little bit room to work. So, you know, like that's a pretty good distance right there. If we need to pull some cable or do some work, it still gives us a bit to grab. Just give it a little snip, set that cable aside. And then this is extra handy to have. Some cable crimp ends. Most bike shops will have this for you. Some bike shops may just give it to you. Some will maybe charge you some change, but they're very handy to have. And what this is going to do is it's going to help this cable last a little bit longer, not fray and get all wild on us. So just get it crimped up, get it set on there. And then the nice thing about these Park Tool ones, the Pedro's ones have it as well, is it has a little crimp here on this internal piece. So I can pinch it to the chain or to the cable, and it's all good to go. You can also occasionally use the clippers themselves to get it bent into place. I used to do that, but I found myself cutting the cable crimps more than I crimped them into place. And with that, your new rear derailleur and new cable have been installed. From here, you would want to adjust the shifting. Again, like I said earlier, I'm not going to go quite into that detail. We have a shifting video where we talk about sort of the fine details of the derailleur, what all the bolts are, and how to adjust the shifting in different scenarios. But for this video, your new rear derailleur has been installed, as has your new cable. So thanks for joining us.